Beste mensen, wij zijn er klaar voor, hopelijk jullie ook. Van harte welkom bij deze middag rond Redmond O'Hanlon in het kader van de Boekenweek. En het thema is natuurlijk reizen. En wie kun je beter vragen dan Redmond O'Hanlon? Als ik spreek voor mezelf en misschien ook voor u. Hij is voor mij al heel lang eigenlijk een held. Ik lees zijn boeken al heel lang. En bijvoorbeeld Naar het hart van Borneo en Tussen Orinoco en Amazone vind ik echt prachtige boeken. Ik bedoel, wij delen onze liefde voor Charles Darwin. Dat is volgens mij voor Redmond ook echt een held die waarschijnlijk zo ook te sprake zal komen. Ik denk dat jullie allemaal wel de O'Hanlon's Helden volgen op de VPRO-televisie. En ja, ik vind het prachtig om te volgen, omdat eigenlijk is O'Hanlon op zijn manier een held. Hij volgt dan zijn helden naar, maar als je ook zijn vroegere boeken leest en ziet wat hij allemaal doet. Hij neemt drugs. Hij eet de meest rare gerechten. Hij komt weer bij een of andere stam terecht en dan denk je, hij zegt nooit, nee, dit doe ik niet. Nee, hij gaat er gewoon in en dan denk ik, ja, wauw, hij is een held voor mij. Dus ik ben benieuwd wat hij vanmiddag allemaal te bedden gaat brengen. Vast prachtige verhalen. Hij wordt geïnterviewd door Jan Blauw. En Jan Blauw werkt op de universiteit. Bij de faculteit der letteren. En Jan die houdt zich voornamelijk bezig met wat er in het onderwijs terechtkomt. Dus hij heeft een wat andere achtergrond, maar hij heeft zich enorm verdiept in O'Hanlon. Dus wat trouwens wel grappig is, want het gaat bijvoorbeeld ook over censuur in het onderwijs. Toen ik op de middelbare school zat, een christelijke middelbare school, toen rond 79, 80 zou ik dus de evolutietheorie van Charles Darwin gehad moeten hebben. Maar dat ging niet door. De leraar zei, dat wordt hier niet onderwezen. Een absolute schande natuurlijk. Want het is toch wel echt de meest bewezen wetenschappelijke theorie die er op dit moment is. Nou ja, dit terzijde. Ik denk dat Redmond O'Hanlon er heel wat meer over gaat vertellen. Graag een warm applaus voor Redmond O'Hanlon en Jan Blauw.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Please, have a seat.
Very much.
Have a seat.
Thank you, Bill. That's, now I'm thoroughly traumatized. I may not be able to speak because I've just been lost in the scrublands of Groningen. And I'm afraid I just had to take a pee in a hedge. Now, normally this is perfectly all right anywhere else in the world, but these beautiful girls, these Dutch girls, on their upright bicycles came past me. And they all stopped. And they got off their bicycles and they said to me in that direct Dutch way, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm taking a pee in the hedge." And they said, the most beautiful one of them said, "We can see that. But why aren't you ready to talk to us?" And I thought, well, where am I meant to be? And they said, "We don't know." They were lost too. But I may never recover from such a moment.
Oh, I can understand.
Yes, sorry, what a silly digression.
I think we may consider ourselves to be very lucky that you got here.
Thank you.
Now, would you care for another glass of water? Or no, you should finish that first. You would?
Yeah, that's one bad thing about traveling. Suddenly, one is not allowed to drink because the liver's had hepatitis and then you're bound to get malaria. You have to work it out whether it's worth it or not. Do you stay at home and keep drinking or risk ruining your liver? Well, now, of course, I wish I'd stayed at home and kept drinking Geneva. So I'm not allowed to anymore.
Well, Mr. O'Hanlon, what shall we tell them? People have come out in great numbers to
this
watch us talk.
magnificent place. This is the way to reuse old buildings.
Yes.
Fill them with intellectuals.
So let's see if I remember some of my questions. I recently moved house, and last night I thought it was a good moment amidst the chaos of my moving boxes, typical for a new place in my life, to test the bathtub. And I thought that seemed an appropriate opportunity to take one of your books along, the one called Trawler. I think it's here. It's published in Dutch under the title Storm. It's the type of adventure where you set off where everybody else, including seasoned fishermen, stayed ashore, and you set off right into a hurricane with gales force 12 on the scale of Beaufort. And it's a very compelling book. And it made me think about your cat at home.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me that as a type of traveler that you seem to be to me, that you're somehow permanently caught between the temptation of a storm in the distance and the, let's call it the loyal love of the cat at home.
Yes.
Would that describe your condition as a traveler?
Yes, it would. I think it's a bad idea to go traveling if you're actually trying to get away from something, always. You must be full of some inner curiosity that drives you. Now, there are so many examples of that, but I think one of the best in the episodes was the Dutch women, the most extraordinary women who've ever lived, probably, apart from Elizabeth I of England and Catherine the Great, maybe. But they were, or Alexina, she was only 25, she was really driven. She wanted to find the source of the Nile. Well, not quite on that scale, but you have to have some real interest. And actually, it's never too late. You can rediscover it. But ideally, the interest should begin in early childhood. It should be pre-intellectual. It should give you a great rush of pleasure, and you don't know where it's come from. It's pre-thought. In my case, it's just birds. Any new bird or any doesn't really have to be very rare. Gives me such a rush of pleasure that it doesn't matter what your problems are at the time. And it's a very good place to live, therefore, in the Netherlands, where you have, I know there's a little bit of a problem with immigrants and so on, but these immigrants are, they're so beautiful, and there's a problem with them as well. But well, they're called geese and ducks, millions upon millions, far more than anywhere else in the world in this beautiful country. So, I don't know, I think if I was Dutch, I'd certainly stay at home and watch birds here.
But do you mean that this is a pedagogic advice to people? If they have children, they want them to grow up to be travelers. And then there's some, what should they do and what should they not do?
There's not a lot you can do. Well, you can take your children to museums, to beautiful places. Above all, do things like go canoeing or sailing, get out there, and then something will catch fire. The parents hope, and it will. I mean, in my case, I remember the moment really clearly. I was 4.5 and toddling across the vicarage lawn, and a missel thrush, I think it's a Grota Leicester, had been clearing out her nest, and she dropped 1/2 of an empty eggshell right in front of me. And I picked it up, of course, and I thought, this is certainly a gift from the missel thrush to me, not knowing about the objective empty cosmos then, or maybe even from God. And that started, well, I started an egg collection, you mustn't do that anymore, and that started a passion that has taken me through everything, really. You need a hobby.
You need a hobby, and you need passion.
Silly thing to say, but you do.
Then the passions need to be there from the start, or they are triggered by something.
Yes, yeah. For traveling, well, it could be anything, after all, as everything is out there. But equally, I don't know, you can make a very good case for someone like, well, say Proust, just staying at home and traveling in his mind. But then you'd have to be Proust. I don't think it would work for anybody else.
Yeah. And you will not always be equally rewarded, I think, in venturing towards the horizon. I mean, there were moments on board of that ship when you probably kind of regretted the decision.
Yes, I did, but at least it was my decision. And everything, if you're a writer, everything is skewed. It's perverted, really. So the worse it got on this trawler, you keep thinking, whatever's happening, I can write about this. I am really suffering. Everybody can see I'm suffering. It's not just my opinion. As Alfred Russel Wallace in the Far East, in his jungles, he would look at his legs and he'd think, that's a new color of tropical ulcer. This one is bright green. There must be a new species of fungus eating me. Now that kept him going.
That's
For
probably
me,
better, right?
I think, well, I could write about this. If I survive, this will make a wonderful paragraph or two. And in this case, it was entirely new to me. You're lying in your bunk, and I didn't know you have to strap yourself in. And then, very gently, it seemed, I was airborne. Fat though I am, I was in the air. And actually, you stay still, and the ship moves around you. So you're in zero gravity. And very gently, I drifted across the guy lying strapped in the bunk next to me, and then bump down on the steel plates. And that wakes you up very powerfully. So then I crawled back and got back in my bunk, and the whole process started again. And the same surprise, I mean, you had to travel, you had to be in this trawler to get this information. I realized at one point that I was being sick into this lavatory. Of course, it's just men on a trawler always, so this thing hadn't been cleaned since the boat was built. And I remember there was one little spatter which was just the shape of a heart, and then I threw up. And I was actually vertical, hanging on to the bowl as hard as I could, my feet right up in the air. And I thought, well, this is one hell of a terrible way, really, I suppose, to earn your money. I thought, these guys are mad. Well, they are. And the interesting thing was, a great, great gift for a writer, which would never have occurred to me, nobody writes about it, was the extraordinary effect that sleep deprivation has on you. You cannot stop talking. The brain, I think, thinks, well, you're not letting me sleep. If the catch is coming in, you just keep working. That's the ethos. And you may be up doing that, gutting fish, for 36 hours, and you can't see properly anymore, and your brain just keeps talking, and you're talking. The only trouble with this was, yes, it was great for a writer, but I was talking too. Now, all these tough sailors, these trawlermen, massive muscles, you need, they have to buy their trousers 5 sizes too big because their muscles are so huge, and then they have to belt it in and in because their waists are, I suppose they're every woman's delight, really. And, where was I? I was thinking about the girls. You mustn't do that. And
yes, but you should have come in November.
Yes,
that's easier.
Yes. And they on shore, these guys, they wouldn't dream of putting a whole sentence together. These are tough, silent Shetland men, and men don't talk. And you certainly do not put a sentence together if it's got any reference to emotions of any kind in it. You drink silently. But here, they just couldn't stop talking, and it all came out. This wonderful guy, the mate, his real worry was that I think, Redmond, you know these sort of things. You're stupid. That you're horrible. You're disgusting dictionary made in your hometown called Oxford, isn't it? Now, there's a word in there that's very difficult. Uxorious. That's what they call me. No, it means that. I think it means, doesn't it? It means you love your wife too much. and I think I love her too much. Do you think I'll put her off? I get home and I say, darling, I've missed you. I can't help it. I just keep talking. I say, I've missed you and I love you and I just dream about your breast night and day. And she says, you stupid old softy, go to bed. You'll sleep for a day and a night and a night and a day. And then we'll go shopping. Now, everybody else says when the men get home, they think they've been having a wonderful time with all the other boys. And they say, look, give me the money, it's all in cash, and we'll go shopping. Now, when there's a trawler in this little port of Stromness, the co-op, there's a police car outside, always the police are sent for, and the trawlermen go in with their wives and they snap. They've had no sleep. The last thing you want to do is actually go shopping. You think that you can cure yourself with a drink, no alcohol on board, but you're really far too far past that stage. You need to go to bed and you need to stay there, exactly as his wife said, for 2 days and 2 nights. But they snap, and the pyramids of baked beans, they make a wonderful target to kick in your seabirds. And the place, once the trawler's in, most of the customers leave the co-op because they know there's going to be flying baked bean tins everywhere. It's not a good profession. Where were we?
We're still on the trawler. I'm not sure about the storm, but no, I was wondering about the mode of traveling and the mode of writing. That if you travel, do you always have the paragraphs and the next sentences on your mind? As you say, like, this is happening to me, this is going to make the book, this is certainly not going to make the book.
Yes. And there are long periods when actually you're really disappointed because you're happy. And nobody has tried to put a Kalashnikov in your fat stomach. And actually, on this particular trip, the Scottish landladies, not a single one of them came for me with a knife. There was very little to write about, and it was the most perfect summer in the last 20 years. The sea was flat, calm, and I was working at the creels, pulling in lobsters. That was just too beautiful, so it really wasn't good material. So, again, as I say, it's perverted. You have your notebook in your pocket. If it's in the jungle, it's in one of these Special Forces waterproof bags. That gives me a kick. And you write down everything you can, but it's really rough, and maybe you see 5 groups of monkeys in that walk if you're 5 days or so away from a village, and you need to take notes right there and then, whatever, even if you're on walking. And then in the evening, I try and make it legible while you can still remember, and then in the morning I make everybody wait for an hour. And then I would write, pretending I'm writing to my wife. And when I eventually gave her the letter, she's always annoyed because we trekked northeast, and then there was not enough love and kisses. And
well, that's good for the book.
That's the routine.
That's good for the book.
That's what you do. Yes. And that's comforting. And if you're carrying a camera, that's really comforting too. Why have you got a camera? What does it mean? It means that you are going to you're going to share your experiences with all your friends, everybody. So you're never alone if you have a camera. And when I run out of film, which always happens quite early on, it can be a devastating feeling. You cannot record this moment. You are actually plunged into reality. And the other time when reality really hit me was not when I ran out of film, but at the end of the Congo. It's not in the book, but when I ran out of money. And then Marcelan, this big guy, said, welcome to the Congo. Yeah, no money now, you're just like us. And I had to sleep on the concrete and wait for the...
Yeah, I can see that. You needed to run out of money to fully arrive in the Congo.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, let's go somewhere else. Let me take you to the 19th century. The age in which you say you should perhaps have been born yourself. You have said so on the
I'd rather change my ideas on that.
Oh, well, we'll get to that. But since you were obviously not, you have to try to get there somehow, so you travel. And the thing that strikes me is from this amazing television series about your heroes of the 19th century, is that you seem to make two journeys at the same time. Right, the one journey is through the actual world of oceans, mountains, and all the new roads ahead, and the other one is the journey through time, and to try to track down the footsteps of your heroes. Yeah. My question is, which one of the two journeys is the most close to your heart?
Oh, well, certainly the journey back into the past by using the present. I mean, the best way, I suppose, or one way to illustrate that is the tremendous importance of travel to Darwin and to Alfred Russel Wallace, to these English, and Dutch explorers. You couldn't stay at home like the French did. You couldn't stay in your laboratory like Cuvier and Lamarck and really get the idea of evolution by natural selection. You needed to, as you say, to be thinking very hard about a timeline, but then you need more than that. You need geographical space. You need to imagine things changing in actual time. You need to visit islands. You need to see, for instance, at the obvious case, that if God had made everything, why was he playing in the Galapagos? These islands are all within sight of each other. Climate is identical. Species, they're different. And you can see they all came from a common ancestor. They haven't evolved that much because the Galapagos Islands are so recent. Now you've got to travel to see that and suddenly see that you really need geographical isolation of a species or population. If it gets split, then the conditions will actually, the truth of it is that it becomes mostly, I think, evolution by sexual selection. As I'm sure you all know deeply, everything is run by the women. Now, it's obvious on these islands. It's less obvious if you're traveling in the Congo, but because Darwin had that magnificent idea, you can transpose it and time into a place like the Congo rainforest. And I saw, which was a mystery to me for about a day until I thought about Darwin. Now, there are guenons, these beautiful little fubsy monkeys, Cercopithecus, really beautiful. Now, one of them has a white mark like that, and one of them like this. And the one with the lateral stripe would look at you, or actually, of course, he was looking at his girls, and he'd go, and they'd think, isn't he lovely? And the other one, they're all mixed up, but I mean, they're feeding in different groups, but they're in the same area. He'd nod like that. And his girls would think, yes, that's absolute, that's delicious. But if one of the girls from the nodders saw one of the men going like this, looking at her, she'd think, disgusting. A clear divide. And that's happened because when the rainforest retreated in a hot period and became split, these monkeys that are perfectly obviously the same species but now don't interbreed, they were in different areas. Now, in one area, the girls happened to like a vertical stripe, and the other, and they'd only breed with guys, or rather, they would breed with the one guy who they liked the best, who had the right kind of newly fashionable stripe on his head. So, different species, all the girls' fault. Same thing with petrels, you see, I mean, going around the world on the Stad Amsterdam, these beautiful birds, which only now we know dive like that. They come in such speed, and they have to, because they're feeding on the only insect in the oceans. I learned such a lot on board that ship. Halibates, it moves at 1 foot a second. 10 feet a second, rather. So it's very fast, and the petrel comes in and gets it. No, but the point is, overnight, always these species are changing in tiny ways. Suddenly you see a petrel with wonderful glasses on. It looks like white round the eyes, for instance. And I think that's because they're very loyal to their home rocks. And so as you travel, you'll be getting a new set of species from one particular outcrop of rock, and all again chosen by the girls. And to finish that topic, I'd just like to say that I think that, everything that men do, if they're heterosexual, and you just make amendments if they're not, is to win the love of women. So that's football, writing, journalism. That's what we do. Nobody agrees with me.
It's very quite simple, actually.
All the girls do, look. Yeah.
So, but do you... No, let's move in a slightly different direction. I want to talk about books. There's this episode, actually I think it was televised in 2 episodes, about Duchayu, your hero who went to the Congo and discovered the gorillas and the cannibals.
Yeah.
And in that episode you point out that he was a best-selling book writer in a time without radio and television.
Yeah.
Right. So you invoke the imagination of the viewer or the reader. Now you yourself, you write your books in a time not only of radio or television, but we also have internet, we have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have the full power of the social media, mobile communication. And my question is about books in this particular age and with this particular technology in the background. Now, how do you feel that the book nowadays relates to these new and so much more fast media? Is it a relationship of competition somehow, one that the book cannot ultimately expect to win? Or is it perhaps a bit different, and could there be some sort of alliance like you seem to promote in the television series yourself? Because you always carry your precious books wherever you go.
Yes, that was genuine. There was a trolley full of books, Alfred Russel Wallace's first edition. So I needed to have some way of carrying them about in Indonesia. And then the director said, no, don't walk that way down the beach, just a bit to your right. And I couldn't see, but there was a giant wave coming in, which is going to make good television. And it burst all over these books. But, they survived. And what was the question?
I sense the timeless relief.
Yeah, the
here,
electronic media. Yes. Well, that was quite easy to answer until, as it were, last month, because I didn't have a computer. At least I was given one by the VPRO, but I never found out how you use it. And an iPad. My kids are very good at all that sort of thing, but I was really pleased when my boy, he said, "Dad, can you get me, I want an iPod." And I thought, this is the latest word for a telescope. At last he wants to look at birds or something. Little devil. And he said, "Yes, Dad." Anyway, so I can't really help you, except that, and I don't have a television, but I remember when when television first came in the 50s, there was this tremendous debate and worry that television would kill the book. Why would anybody want to read a book when they can look at television in the evenings? That wasn't what happened at all. Book sales really took off because books were discussed and taken seriously, and it's easy to make them interesting on television. You can bring a book alive, and then people will want to have it for themselves and enjoy it for themselves. And as you say, you won't be taking your iPad into the bath. You're quite right, you'd be floating trawler around in the bath. But it's just there's something so special about a book. And, their value's gone up and up. They complement each other. And a concrete example of this that I watched at first hand was the works of Charles Darwin. Now, I bought an Origin of Species for £30, which seemed a terrible amount of money, a first edition, and then I more or less got almost all of them for £5, £7, whatever. And then the BBC did a very brave thing. They lost a lot of money, but they did a long series on the Beagle. Not like the sensible intellectual Dutch did it, but in costume. So it was one of the things the BBC do best. It was a historical drama. And I went to this Darwin, an antiquarian bookshop, and gradually the prices were going up and up. And halfway through the series, there were two first editions in this shop, which is astonishing thought now. They were priced at 300, and then in no time 3,000, and then 30,000. The power of television. And 2 months ago, a copy, one of the very rare copies, sold for $300,000. Now, that's all to do with television. No academic will like me saying such a thing, but it's very powerful. It boosts, it controls our interests, intellectual life, it gives it vigor, and that's what I think. Mind you, I don't have a television, so...
Yeah, well, that's a good analysis for the people who sell the books here, because I believe so.
I do. I hear about a program that I really do not like, although I would love to actually see it myself. But there was always a complaint because some television station ran against Handen's Heroes and the Beagle this awful, wonderful, sexy program called Farmers' Wives. I think it's a great idea. No, it's not.
Now, but do you think that there is a follow-up question on this, the complementary relationship? I find that's an interesting approach, I think. So you say that the books are here to stay, basically, with us.
The television is there in a way to serve the book.
Yeah, but is there a sense of duty involved for these media? Is it perhaps, or just is it self-interest?
No, duty, I'm afraid, went out with God and the British Army. No, I don't think there's a duty to support the book. It doesn't work like that. If it's not entertaining, if it doesn't grab our interests, we're an intensely curious species, so it's not very difficult to get people's interest. But if you can't, then forget it. After all, think of it this way. Think how many books are published every year. Think how, luckily, how they edit themselves out. They cease to interest other people, and we are the beneficiaries of, now, generations, hundreds and hundreds of years of good taste. It takes time to give us the classics. It took time even to introduce the great Tolstoy, the greatest writer who ever lived, into the English-speaking world. But he's there, and he's there to stay, and television and film and every other media will continue to bring him alive in different versions.
Yeah.
No, I don't see any kind of problem.
We could see a practical one. I was having my own work, my own research in mind. So I research textbooks in education, and I remember vividly how much weight is involved with books. Right? So
true.
they make you as a child carry them.
Yeah.
At least here in the Netherlands, from your house to school and back, 30 kilometers on a bicycle every day. So you develop a certain hate-love relationship with those books, and somehow the future would seem a bit literally lighter if it would just be a memory stick, or
maybe just keep the books at home. I think.
Yeah.
But I heard that in some incredibly advanced Dutch school, or as it's such an advanced country, probably every school in the Netherlands, they give the children an iPad, and you carry that around. Now, I finally cracked it, sort of. The other night, I was amazed, this Google thing, and the very first topic I looked up was called alcoholism. And for some terrible reading. And I can quite see how wonderful this new invention is. Actually, I was staying with the number 3 at Microsoft because they just launched their Explorer program, and I thought that they wanted me to talk, and they thought it was very funny. I thought it was very frustrating, and I couldn't get into Redmond Way, the Microsoft main building, because you have to be a computer whiz kid and know how to do all these things. So an actual human being had to let me in. Anyway, that's really nothing to do with it. But then staying with him, the gates open. Every plant is from the Pleistocene. It's well, it's wealth as you can't imagine it. And he said to me, look, well, my yacht. Now I thought, a little Dutch yacht, lovely, a couple of sails. And then there was a picture of his yacht, and it was a converted battle cruiser. And it traveled around the world where the captain thought that he, Nathan Mervold, might want to be next. And a crew of 50 ex-British Navy officers. And he said to me suddenly, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Justice at last. Wealth no longer belongs to brutal aristocrats who, in an arbitrary way, though they may look after it well, look after the land. Wealth now belongs to intelligence. Intelligence is rewarded at last. This has never happened before in the history of the world. The brain is finally actually getting concrete rewards. And I thought, yeah, well, in your case, it's a bit excessive, but yes. He has a marvelous collection of calculating machines, and he wanted Babbage's calculator, which is in University College London, the first computer. And he got everything else, he just hadn't got this one. So he got hold of the university the trustees and said, look, how much would you like? I'll give you a new science block if you give me your calculating machine. And so all the academics got round and they said, no, I don't think we can, it's in the trust. No. It was really worried them. And then he said, okay, well then, I tell you what, I'll give you 2 new science blocks and a sleeping quarters for your students. And I'll pay double and you can have the buildings within 6 months. So there was another meeting. I'm sure some of them had a breakdown, these dons. But in the end they said no. It's just extraordinary, the power.
Well, the power, yes. And it seems like the beginning of a new theory on political economy.
Yes.
With the rewarding of intelligence. Now, talking about theories and academia, let's go to Charles Darwin for a bit. Because you wrote an interesting portrait of him some years ago. I think it was I don't have it here, but and you wrote fascinating things about observations, I find, about his personality as a key to his, perhaps even his success as a scholar, on the success of his theory. And the 2 of his main personality traits were the sincerity of his passion for science, and I think sincerity is the key word here. And his combined with a gentle, kind nature as a person. And the combination was perhaps, that would be the actual question, kind of essential, because it made his audience prone to accept his message more readily.
Yes, no, he was, incredibly shocking things he was saying, and dismantling the whole happy Victorian world, and Edwardian world too, which I grew up in, and the Dutch share it with the English identical religious background in natural theology. It's a thoroughly Protestant idea. You won't find the trace of it in Roman Catholicism, in the vertical world of Catholicism. This is a linear world in which God made everything. So gathering, collecting the tiniest beetles, getting a series different species. This is nothing trivial about it. This is actually glorifying the work of God. This is the only way to discover his handiwork and to enjoy it. So there you have all the mahogany cabinets with all the eggs in them, all the beetle cabinets you pull out, the whole business of collecting to glorify God. And the more you study this world, it was thought, the more comforted you will be. As William Paley, 1802, in Natural Theology said, consider the joints in the antennae of an earwig, how perfectly they are made, as if the Creator had nothing else to create. So, how much more care and love did he lavish on us? And then, of course, there will be mansions in heaven for us and so on. And walking through a wood, you are in a perfectly balanced, wonderful, happy world. Yes, nettles there may sting you, but right next door there will be dock leaves, so you can rub yourself with a dock leaf and take away the pain. This was this underlying world of natural theology. Darwin came into it all and just switched the explanation. So Paley would say that God has made a moth with a very long proboscis so that it can reach the nectar in the flower, which God also made, so the two fit. And Darwin just said, no, it's taken millions of years. This is evolution by natural selection, trial and error. And, well, it was just so convincing. It's as if he'd said, which he didn't, that consider a sparrow hopping along the hedge, and then consider a butterfly sitting there with its wings closed, and as the sparrow hops up to eat the butterfly opens its wings, and on each wing there is a big eye, and it looks like an owl. And the sparrow falls off the twig, wets itself, and butterfly flies off.
Exactly, reconsiders, yes.
The natural theological explanation was God has put those eye spots in that butterfly's wing or that moth's wing for our delight. That's there to please us. Well, even, I'm afraid, every clergyman could see which explanation was the more powerful, and the suicide rate in certainly British vicars and curates really soared. It was a terrible business, but he was so respectable that he was a real English gentleman, a gentleman. You couldn't take him to task. The bad side of that, though, is that he, not being combative, relying on Huxley, relying on Hooker, relying on his friends to fight for him, is that inside he was anxious, nervous, and when Fleeman Jenkin, a Scottish mathematician, said, look, Darwin, it's ridiculous. If you've got a mutation, if you have some aberrant form arises, then it won't last. Because he's thinking in terms of genetics as a mixing, the blood. It was always thought of as a liquid until Mendel came along, rediscovered by your De Vries. So it's very recent, the idea of genetics as particulate. So Darwin lost his nerve, because of course you think of sex as a mix of liquids, you don't look at a sheet. That's what it means. How would you know otherwise? So,
but do you think it was a good thing? It was a good thing that he did not fight his own battles.
If he
Maybe it worked for him.
He wouldn't. You see, with hindsight, another lovely thing that history does is pare away later editions of science books. So a classic becomes the first edition of The Origin. Well, in the 6th edition, you'll find there's actually no mention of evolution by natural selection. He talks about use and disuse and habit, just like Lamarck and the giraffe growing its neck because it wanted to. He lost his nerve, and there's a page and a half in The Descent of Man. Wonderful, wonderful book, the second half. Evolution by sexual selection. That's really something to read. But in the first half, he says how sorry he thinks that he'd given much too much importance to natural selection. So that's the other side of not being really confident.
Yeah, but I was intrigued by the passage in that portrait that you wrote about, where you describe how probably he himself, as the first person, became aware of the implications of his own theory, and
Yes.
that must have created some sort of solemn solitude,
Well,
or loneliness, perhaps.
He waited 27 years to publish, and then he only published what he really thought when Alfred Russel Wallace sent a paper over, and Darwin had been teasing Wallace for years, but thinking of Wallace as working class and just a collector. So, I mean, Darwin in a way really deserved it. Wallace would write some theory about evolution, and Darwin would write back and say, no, you're doing very well, but it's not quite right. I have another idea. Why didn't he just tell him? Anyway, he couldn't face it, and he was, when he was writing The Origin, and before that, well, in order to make sure that his work really was correct in his own eyes, that he was right to be feeling that, you know, even though he felt he was a murderer, he had murdered God, and brought great suffering and mental suffering into the world, that actually it was true. So he spent 8 years studying barnacles. Now, who would ever be interested in barnacles? Well, actually, they're very interesting because they're hard, and you can see the progression and the evolution through the rocks. But that was a way, really, of delaying publication.
Yeah. Do you think that he somehow felt the responsibility for those accusations? Like, that's not a simple thing to be accused of murdering God.
No, I'm sure he did. I think he was.
And as you wrote yourself, the clergy were amongst his most fervent readers.
Yes, well, they were the only
a substantial
people,
number of them committed suicide.
Sad for them, because they were the only people fully qualified to buy and read his books, because it fitted exactly into the world of natural history, natural theology, the great enjoyment of the religious class. They were fully qualified to understand exactly how devastating it was. And I think just personally it can't have helped, because he adored Emma, his wife, and he made her into his nurse, whether he was ill really physically or what he was ill, because psychosomatically or not, it doesn't really matter. And well, you see, every night he found it very difficult to sleep, because he said his brain was just a mechanical device for producing ideas, which is true. And he was trying to sleep, but before she got into bed, she would pray aloud. And she would say, "Dear God, please save my Charles from his wicked, wicked ideas. Please make him into a good Christian. And please stop him writing about this thing, whatever it is, natural selection. Thank you, God." And then you get into bed. Now, they're very bad. I don't think one could have taken that.
I suppose you could personally relate to that bit of his story. But to what degree would you consider him to be some sort of a role model?
I think to the nth degree, wonderful. But you have to be that gentle, quiet, inquiring type.
And you are not, you're saying?
I don't think so. I don't think I have the patience. Well, it was put to the test for me at the end of Lake Tele. We crossed this wonderful lake in the Congo, and I was with two guys, and we covered ourselves in mud because we heard these chimpanzees calling, and I got right underneath a tree with an old male in it. Now, he was there, he was bald, it was like Fenton. Anyway, and he was just another leaf, he like, look up. And I was so bored, I moved. And then he looked down, and I saw me, and he went, It was the most disgusting thing he'd ever seen. And then he thought about what he's going to do, looking up at him. And then he peed at me really accurately. I was drenched. And I felt so unwelcome. And then he swung around and he defecated, he shat at me. It was like little rabbit pellets, but fruity, shotgun blast. And then I got the message. But then there were two saplings on this branch. And he grabbed them, and he shook them, and he went, "Wah!" And then, all the young males I hadn't noticed, these big black shapes moving towards me, yeah? And they're all going, "Ooh, ooh, 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 wah!" And the noise is staggering. And I thought, my God, no wonder. I mean, this display is so effective. No wonder really socially insensitive leopards turn and run. It's, I've never felt so unwanted. And then I saw these, they're big, they're really big, I realized. They're down on the ground behind me, and with their hands, they're just whack, whack, and the leaves and mud and water flying all over. And then I suddenly thought, my God, that Jane Goodall's description of chimpanzees on the rampage, what they really like to do, their idea of a fantastic day out is to grab a colobus monkey or any monkey, or me, I thought, by the ankles, and you smash their brains out against the tree and you eat them. And that's all very exciting. Everybody shares a bit. You rip it up. And then the two guys with me got up and hit the tree with their machetes. And I'd like to say the chimpanzees ran off, being properly impressed, but they didn't. They just ambled off and looked round, and you could see exactly what they wanted to say. They were saying, "Just remember this, you piss off and don't come back." And they went.
So nature gets personal.
Yes.
Right. Let's see if I have another question. Yes, I want to talk about one of those heroes and about the time traveling again. Because I watched the 2 episodes about Przewalski.
Oh yeah.
Which I liked very much.
Apparently Putin was very annoyed.
He was?
He was. That
Enlighten
he
us.
let us in, because Przewalski is his big hero. And the very mention Przewalski was homosexual, he couldn't take it. I mean, obviously Putin is too, but he wouldn't have it, and we're not allowed back into any of those Przewalski museums. Well, it's too late.
Well, if he has seen the episodes, then he would also be aware that like closing in on Przewalski also brings you closer to Stalin.
Yes. 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 But Przewalski is apparently really is Putin's hero.
No, I can see why.
Yeah.
I can see why. He's being the strong character, the strong leader. He represents a lot of things that Putin probably.
And 2 young Cossack
likes.
boys in his tent. And he didn't. Przewalski, he's not brave in that travelling way. You really can't admire him for that, because he never left home, because home was where the love is. Home was where his 2 lovers were, and he took them with him everywhere.
Yeah, he did not have an anchor place with a cat, right? Like that.
It's not on. Have you Cossacks
No, it's
with you?
different.
No.
But I'm interested in the contrast with Darwin, because with Darwin being the passionate and the very kind man, and this Przewalski is he was certainly passionate, I think, as a traveler, as a spy probably for the fatherland.
Yeah.
But he would not exactly fit the word gentle.
No.
I think.
No, brutal.
Why did his biographer, the British biographer that you visited, he couldn't wait to see the end of him.
It's absolutely wonderful to go and interview a biographer who says that he couldn't wait for the bastard to die, and it was ruining his life. And yes, yeah, he was. Whereas Darwin, lovely, he's so worried about everything. There's a little mark, we don't quite know what it is, a tick, but he was sick at the end of every paragraph writing The Origin. And it wasn't until he got write his last book, which again, in terms of childhood passion, links with his very first paper, which again was about worms when he was 17 years old. Now, the end of his life, I really recommend this book. It's fantastic. If you can't sleep, read this. You'll be out cold and very happy. It's called Vegetable Mold and Earthworms. And he put a massive intellect into it, absolutely loved his worms. And he had a worm stone on the lawn in Down House, kept there for years. And he proved, he didn't have to do anything, but the experiment, he loved experiments, he couldn't stop. The worm stone gradually sank into the earth. Why? Because the worms are churning up the soil and the heavy stone is just settling. It's worms that bury our ruins. Nobody thought of that. Fantastic reversal. And then he wanted to know if his beloved worms, what did they think about, how did they know about shapes? What they must, he makes you start to think these worms are really intelligent. And there's the great man with his beard. He's kneeling down and he's cut with his scissors. There's a wormhole. He's cut a square piece of leaf, a long piece of leaf, a triangular piece of leaf, and then he waits. And then the worm at dusk or in dawn always selected, as far as I remember, the long bit that he could pull back into the. I half thought he was going to discover that worms actually fold it up neatly and take it under their arm. And then he wonders can worms hear? So he gets his son Francis to play his trumpet right up against the worm jar. He's got his worms in this jar, and the worms don't react. So Darwin's sort of taking very serious notes. So then he flicks the jar and the worms go. So they have touch, but they don't have hearing. Boring.
I think we can only admire the richness of this imagination, right? It betrays or it reveals a rich mind.
Yeah.
And that's why that would call.
Also, he's not afraid. He's never afraid to be simple. No. Never afraid to ask the simple question. Just as Tolstoy is never afraid to write a really simple sentence. That's part of genius, I think. Not giving a damn what other people will think of you. You're not worried that someone will say, that's a simple idiot question. Mm-hmm. There is perhaps no idiot question.
No, so that's like the traveling towards truth, which in a way is what a scientist does, I think, is like an autonomous process, right? People can watch, but
not interfere. Focus is.
Yeah. So, so what qualifies Darwin as a hero is something else than what qualifies Przewalski as a hero. But with that. With Przewalski, you really closed in. You held this actual gun, and you found a way. I nearly fell off my chair laughing when I watched it. You found a way to even touch that horse.
Yes.
Right? They let you touch that. Yes. Let you go into the cabin in that museum to touch the horse that now bears his name. And as to the time traveling, there's a question to this little expose. So you really closed in on him, I think. But of course, it's time travel, so you can't really make it because the man is dead, right? But if there would be a way, right, to complete that tracking down, and you could actually pose a question to him, what question would you like to have asked him?
Are you gay?
Solving one of the big mysteries of Russian history.
Yes.
Once and for all.
Yeah.
Well, very good. That's settled then. Another question about the past and the present, right? You love the 19th century You wish you would have been born there. And I think this has everything to do with the role that imagination can play, right? So it's not that crystal clear as the present around us sometimes seems to be. So there's a role to be played for imagination, I assume. But do you find in the opposite direction, is the present boring? Is it too boring?
Oh, absolutely not. No. There's a vast amount still to explore. I wish I was young, but anyway, it's called the ocean. We know nothing about it. 90% of it is unexplored. It's a tremendous opportunity. Somebody who just got to invent a cheap way of descending for 8 miles and some kind of vehicle that can take the pressure of, I think it's 80 steam locomotives sitting on you. And of course, darkness. And you see, if you're down there with a robot vehicle or in a submarine, even in Alvin or the Japanese, or they have one, everything big and interesting and fast is going to get out of the way of your lights. You're not going to see it. Though it has to be said that 8 miles down in the Marianas Trench, the Japanese, the last picture, the last thing they saw, was what it looks like a perfectly ordinary flatfish. It can't be, of course, but it's there. It's all just waiting to be explored. And of course, outer space too. Let's whip into a wormhole.
Do you have plans to do this?
I think it's what? Me?
Yes. I could just see you enjoy this being on
I'd love to go down. It wouldn't have to be in the Marianas Trench, but say 3 miles down. Now, absolute darkness, you'd think. Silence. I don't think so. Sure, they wouldn't be crowded there, but a lot of noise and flashing lights, wonderful blues and yellows, and no red because that doesn't that wavelength's gone. But a lot of flashing lights and things like the deep sea angler with its lure flashing like this, waiting for a little fish to come, and then it opens its massive mouth and in goes the current. And so much to be discovered. Let's just stay with the anglerfish, the deep sea anglerfish. I always imagined, and every textbook actually still says, that they're tiny. And I was giving a talk in the British Museum, the Natural History Museum, and they said, would you like a fee? And I said no, because I knew it was impossible to get into this backstage. No, I just like a tour of the fish section. And whoa. There, I was so surprised, it was very difficult to talk afterwards. And there, in these jars, actually about this big, there is the female anglerfish, big, and stuck in her side are these tails of something else. Now, we know that the female, very rare, all dispersed, not a lot to eat, of course. She's waiting. Now, after the eggs hatch the males, and females of course, but the males, they have no gut. They have nothing but one short blast of energy. They're really just, cases for sperm. Now,
they're just waiting for the right moment.
They do, but they've got tremendous sense of smell. So they're lucky if they can smell, we all are, they can smell a female and home in on her in the dark, and they come up getting as close to her cloaca as possible, and they force their way into the skin. They are absorbed. Their blood system is linked to hers. They grow there, they're stuck there, that's it. And this particular one had 5 little tails sticking out of her. Now I thought, well, that's great. I mean, this is the feminist dream. Here your males. They're not going drinking with the boys. They'll wash up any time you like. They do exactly what you say, all you have to do, presumably, is to give them a few porny magazines, and they just wait until your eggs are ready, and then you squeeze them, or I don't know what you do, but anyway, they go with you everywhere. They're no trouble at all. Yeah. So I told them.
Maybe you should not write that book. That's no, I think we have time for one last question. In one of your books, or no, it was in the book by Rudy Rocher.
Oh yeah.
It was mentioned that you observed that to be a travel writer is not necessarily a very good thing for a person who also wants to be a father and a family man. There's a certain incompatibility. You can do only so much at the same time, and writing takes a lot of focus. Is it better when you make television?
When
is making television better for love?
No comparison.
No
Television's wonderful for family life. There's no suffering involved. You're doing all this with people who are completely committed. Well, they're artists. It's a wonderful feeling. No time to get depressed. Can't stay in bed in the mornings. Everything is full of interest, and you get back exhilarated. Wonderful. And you can stop. That's the point. You can stop. That's it. It doesn't carry on. Now, a writer, sad but it's true, he's never really available, fully available to anybody except his own imagination, and it has to be that way. And his work never stops. You find you come to a problem writing something, and you need a sleep, and then in the morning it will be solved. Well, where's the place for your family and all of that? Hanif Kureishi said, and just recently, that I thought it's rather a good remark, and horrible too, that writers are people who are hated by their families and loved by strangers.
But so a televising traveler has an easier life than a writing traveler?
Yes.
That would be, okay.
Yes, luxury. I mean, incredibly lucky.
So you
One of the luckiest men alive.
So you're not gonna, then maybe you're not gonna publish another book? Now that you've discovered television.
No, I hope not. I don't think so.
Right, it's a bit sad perhaps, but we have to end on this note. Time is up. I thank you so much for this conversation.
Well, thank you, and I'm sorry we got lost.
Well,
I mean, it's not surprising really.
It doesn't. It was fun.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ben.